Voters have different worries. I think it's important to go around, to be seen on the ground. It's important to be seen listening to voters. We give voters why to vote for your side, your candidate, your party, and not one of the other ones. I try to come up with an approach or a model to win elections that can be applied in any country. And I've come up with the 4 M's, which are message, media, money, and make no mistakes. If you're running for mayor or for governor or city councillor, state representative, the dynamics, the tools are very different from a national election. You need the 3 P's: projects, presence, performance. You have to do it.
Welcome to Train Golkar. Today we are very honored to have the presence of Dr. Perron, a very prominent political scientist and consultant who has helped win elections for many members of parliaments, governors, mayors, and even presidents from around the world. So it is very appropriate that today we talk about how to win political elections with Train Golkar. Dr. Perron, thank you for joining us.
Good to be here, thank you.
We are very excited. We've learned that you have summarized a strategy on how to win national level elections in 4 M's. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, I think you're referring to my TEDx talk.
Correct.
I try to come up with an approach or a model to win elections that can be applied in any country. And I've come up with the 4 M's, which are message, media, money, and make no mistakes. If you have the 4 M's, you're in pretty good shape to win high-profile elections.
That's great and easy to remember, 4 M's. So the first one you said was message. Tell us more about message.
Yeah, when I talk about message to candidates and politicians, they often think of a slogan or a tagline. And actually, a good message is much more than just a slogan. It's more than a slogan, less than a party platform. In fact, my mentor, Dr. Fauché, from 20 years ago in Washington, D.C., has taught me something that I still think is very relevant today. He said that the message is the reason we give voters why to vote for your side, your candidate, your party, and not one of the other ones. And that message has to be short, has to be simple, it has to be something that is relevant for voters. Politicians love to talk about things that matter to them, what office they're gonna run for, under what coalition, with what party. Voters have different worries, so it has to be in sync with the political demand of the time. It has to be tested, it has to be fully delivered, and the slogan actually should be a short summary of the message that is communicated with oomph. But the message itself, it's more than a slogan, less than a party platform. It's the application of the party platform to the current setting, your opponent, and the demand of the time.
That's very interesting. So message is the utmost importance, and message has to be delivered to the people, to the voters, right?
Yes, and that's where the second M comes into play, media. I like to look at media in terms of paid media, earned media, social media, and owned media. So let's start with paid media. Basically, this is advertising, which I like a lot because you can control the message. You can communicate whatever you want to communicate. So there is this talk that television advertising is no longer important. I strongly disagree. While television advertising may be less dominant than 20 years ago, it's still the ace of political communication. I like to say that advertising is a guest that was not welcomed, not invited to the party, because it allows to communicate with people who don't care much about politics. So that's the first one, paid media. The big disadvantage is, of course, as the name indicates, it costs money. And that's where earned media comes into play. Earned media basically is PR. You're trying to get news coverage in the media. And that's an advantage for people who have less money, but maybe something provocative, something new to say, because the media likes conflict. So you're trying to get coverage in the media that is favorable for yourself. Now, the big advantage of this is that it's very credible. It's more credible than paid media. Third, you have social media. It can be paid or earned, but I like to treat it separately because it's so succinct from the traditional media we used to know. I happen to think that social media is greatly overestimated, but doesn't mean that we should not use it as a tool. So that's social media. Lastly, there is owned media. Owned media, I mean, there are politicians who own TV stations, Silvio Berlusconi in Italy, for example, or radio stations, or maybe it's a local radio station, but it can also be a party magazine, or it can be a blog. And again, of course, the big advantage is that you're communicating without a filter with your target audience.
So these are 4 types of media to deliver the message, right? You mentioned there is paid media, there is owned media, there is social media, and there is also the earned media,
yes,
right?
And I think in the old days there was like 1, 2, 3 TV stations that were very dominant, and I think definitely the media environment is changing in most countries. So nowadays candidates really have to play the whole field. You have to do everything.
And of course, managing all these kind of media would need some resources, right?
Yes, and that's the third M, money. Money is the gasoline. You need money because the best message has to be heard. You have to be seen. So money will make you visible, will create awareness. I think though it's very important not to create awareness without a message, without content. And that's where money, as helpful as it is, actually can be dangerous sometimes. I mean, it's not a problem that I have very often, but it has happened to me that politicians actually had too much money. And how can too much be a problem? It's because you do every ad, you use every tool, and it undermines the message and decision-making discipline. So money, of course, helps. Money gives you freedom to continue, even when you're low in the surveys. Money creates awareness, but money does not communicate a message by itself. It does not give you discipline, and it cannot buy volunteers, for example. So this M is sometimes a bit overestimated, sometimes used as an excuse, but of course, in all honesty, one of the important M's in a campaign.
That's very interesting that you said that even too much money can be a problem if it is not used wisely.
Yes, I mean, do you remember anything, for example, from Michael Bloomberg's primary campaign? It's just a few years ago. He spent so much more money, actually more money than all the other candidates combined. And not only did he lose, but we would barely remember a message, an ad, a tagline, anything. And there are actually, if you think about it, quite a few examples of very rich, self-funded candidates who ended up losing. So there are also examples where they won. So yes, it is an important factor, but by itself, it doesn't really communicate a message or implement a plan.
Right. So money by itself is not the most important factor. Message is not the most important factor by itself, as well as the media. So what could go wrong?
Well, that's the fourth M, make no mistakes, right? I think one of the very typical mistakes, especially for new candidates, is that they overestimate themselves. Actually, one of the benefits I often bring to the table with candidates is that I tell them based on surveys where they really stand. And it's understandable, if you're running for office, you're surrounded by people who applaud to you, tell you how great you are. but sometimes this is a really humbling experience when they actually see their true, real appeal at the moment. That said, I think another very typical mistake is to produce campaign materials without content. Sometimes when I work in a country where I don't understand the local language, just by simply looking at the material, I feel it's propaganda. Because it's so hard sell, it's the candidate all over the place, it's not centered on the voter. So I think that's another very, very common mistake, that candidates waste a lot of money and resources on content that really is empty of a message. Other mistakes are also that people think they can do their own survey. I think that's a classic, actually. They think they can do their own survey with their own employees sometimes, or university students. I think that's wrong. I think either you decide that your startup campaign, you don't have a lot of money and then you rely on your gut feel, or you say, I'm a professional campaign, I'm running a professional campaign, and then you invest the money into doing proper market research. For me, as a benchmark, it may depend on the country and the purchasing power, but I would say that $500,000 is probably the line. If you have less than $500,000, it's more or less a startup campaign. If you spend more than $500,000, it's a professional campaign, and you should invest into market research.
That's very interesting. So we've learned about the 4 M's: message, media, money, and make no mistakes. Among these 4, are any more important than the other, or any needs to be prioritized over the other?
Yes, I mean, it's good to have all 4. To a certain degree, you can compensate. So, for example, if you don't have a lot of money, you need a better message. If you have a lot of money, you can more easily make up for mistakes. So you can compensate to a certain degree. It helps to have all 4. If I had to choose one, I would choose the message.
That's very important. Message is important, and we've learned a lot from you today about the 4 M's on how to win a national level political election. So thank you for joining us in this session. We'll come back to you and talk about local elections with Train Golkar.